the CBS Evening News this Friday from the hurricane zone. Florence turns deadly as this massive storm crashes into the Carolinas with strong winds, record rainfall, and flooding. Hundreds of thousands are without power. We have a team of correspondents throughout the region for a special one-hour edition, and it begins tonight with the headlines in 60 seconds.
Hurricane Florence is powerful, slow, and relentless.
We got hit very hard.
We're right in the eye wall. This is some of the worst of Florence now.
At 12 noon, high tide rolled in, and with it came some of the most ferocious wind gusts we saw all day.
In the New Bern area, we've got big issues with storm surge.
Hundreds were rescued overnight from the rushing water. Dozens more are still trapped.
Right now, you can't tell the rivers from the roads.
I've never seen this kind of damage here.
It's bad. The water's just coming up. It's a lot of wind, a lot of trees. We got a lot of down power lines.
We're about 20 miles inland from the coast. This is a massive 63-year-old oak tree that was toppled.
It has been a restless night for many of these evacuees. Now they are hoping that they will still have homes to return to.
This is life-threatening. We haven't even seen the backsides of the storm yet.
We've never been in anything like that.
The winds were howling past.
This is scary. It's exactly what they said it was going to be.
Good evening, I'm Jeff Glor in Wilmington, North Carolina, and as the East Coast gets battered, this is a special West Coast expanded edition of the CBS Evening News. I am standing in a parking lot that for much of the day was part of the swollen Cape Fear River as we talk about these historic rainfall amounts associated with what was Hurricane Florence, now Tropical Storm Florence. Florence came ashore this morning as a Category 1 hurricane with 90-mile-an-hour winds 10 miles east of here in Wrightsville Beach. It has been downgraded now to a tropical storm, but it's not going anywhere fast. The governor called Florence, quote, an uninvited brute who doesn't want to leave. Florence is now blamed for at least 5 deaths. Nearly 1 million homes and businesses lost power, so this will be a night in the dark for a lot of people in the Carolinas. We have a team of correspondents throughout the region as we bring you extensive coverage tonight of Florence. Florence roared ashore under the cover of darkness, raking the region with pelting rain, widespread flooding, and high winds. Gusts reached over 100 miles an hour in Wilmington, the highest recorded here since 1958, tearing the roofs and facades off buildings and toppling trees.
Oh, there's a lot of trees down.
By midday, Florence claimed her first lives when a tree crashed onto a home in Wilmington, North Carolina, killing a mother and her infant daughter. Rescue workers were able to save the father.
It's sad news to get on a day like today. There's no preparing for something like that.
In Morehead City, what was a building became a pile of rubble. A rising river in Belhaven nearly swallowed the first floor of this house. The lights were still on. It was hard to tell if anyone was home. And the high winds blew transformers, dropping Wilmington into darkness. By daybreak, we could finally see what until then we could only hear and feel. And this is some of the worst of Florence now. It is Friday morning. This is the Cape Fear River, which is just raging. And we're right in the eye wall winds, which are the worst. At one point, the 350-mile-wide, slow-moving storm packed winds so fierce, we'd all but lost contact with our New York studio during our morning broadcast.
We may, in fact, have Jeff now. Jeff, can you hear me?
Apologies again for some of the communication issues here as we deal with some of the worst of Florence as she arrives now. The rain is coming sideways, down, and up. Florence drove more than 1 million people from their homes, and more than 700,000 lost power. Rain ranging from 1 to 3.5 feet has already fallen, and it's not over. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper.
For overall damage, it will be hard at the end of the day, I think, to find a rival for this storm.
In Wilmington, many of the trees that contributed to its historic beauty are now gone.
So this is my street. This is your street right here?
Yes. George Pace returned to his neighborhood and saw his home for the first time, expecting the worst, but discovering only minimal damage. Florence may be gone from here by tomorrow, but she will not be forgotten. Wilmington Mayor Bill Saffo.
You can walk faster than the storm is moving.
I mean, there's trees down all over. Right. How long is it? How long do you think it'll be before people get power back?
It could be anywhere from a week to 2 weeks, possibly even a bit longer than that in some areas.
The White House told us today that the president will visit the Carolinas sometime next week once they figure out that visit will not interrupt rescue and recovery operations. We're going to move now about 70 miles south of here to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Don Daler is getting some of the worst of this storm. Don, what are you seeing right now?
Jeff, this is the Grand Strand. It's 60 miles of beaches. It's normally full of tourists this time of year that inject tens of millions of dollars into the South Carolina economy. But today, it is being lashed with torrential rains and near hurricane force winds. Now, the concern had been that the high tide that's expected around midnight tonight would combine with that storm surge and 15 to 18 inches of rain and swamp what is the second fastest growing metropolitan area in the United States. But now that it appears that Florence is passing just to our north, the concern has shifted to inland flooding, not just because of all of this rain, but because of a lot of the rivers from North Carolina flow into South Carolina. And as you know, those are already inundated with floodwaters. The result and the main concern now is that all of that river water combines with all the water that's already there and affects the infrastructure, the bridges, residences, farms, and other buildings. The cost to South Carolina, if this happens, if the storm continues the way it's going, could be in the billions. Yeah.
All right, Don, thanks very much. We just got another blast of wind here in North Carolina in Wilmington. Actually, we're told now that the wind sensor at the Wilmington airport that measured that highest gust of 105 miles an hour, the highest since 1958, broke today because the wind was so bad. On that note, we're going to check in with Megan Glaros of our Chicago station WBBM. She's been here with us the whole time. She's in our mobile weather lab. Megan, talk about what's happening.
Yeah, we're getting some of the heavier bands that are still wrapping around the outer portions of Tropical Storm Florence. So it may not be a hurricane anymore, but look outside. We're driving through a roadway that's essentially flooded, the Cape Fear River right to our immediate right, and we anticipate more rainfall coming down from this system. It's going to be a continuous rain for many folks, probably through Saturday, and for many until Sunday. Let's take a peek at the latest on the radar right now. Wilmington right here, so you can start to see some of those heavier bands that we're seeing, but imagine what it feels like a little bit farther north, closer towards New Bern and up into Morehead City. They're getting more intense bands wrapping around the outer portion of that storm, and also that is where storm surge is a greater concern at this point. We're looking still at the potential for 8+ feet of storm surge in these areas, even though this is now down to a tropical storm. Look at New Bern, look at Morehead City, along some of the outer portions of North Carolina. And what we're going to be looking at as this storm works slowly down to the south and west is still torrential rain. It's coming down fiercely. And look at tomorrow. We're still talking about some intense thunderstorms. And as the storm shifts south, those intense thunderstorms shift south and west with it. And so now Wilmington will be getting what New Bern is getting right now. And that's how slowly the system is moving essentially at a crawl. You could probably walk faster. We've got a 3-mile-per-hour forward speed on this thing at this point. And because of that, we're expecting to find some torrential rains on top of what we've already had. Could see 10 inches more in spots, Jeff.
All right, Megan, thanks very much. You mentioned New Bern. New Bern has dealt with a particularly bad situation today. That is 95 miles northeast of here, and Chris Van Cleve is there. Chris, what's happening?
Jeff, New Bern is finally getting a break from the rain, but still getting strong winds, and there is water everywhere. Block after block has been swamped by Florence, and that has prompted a lot of people here to call for help. Hurricane-force winds brought a 10-foot storm surge rushing into the riverfront city of New Bern. Homes looked like islands as roads were inundated. Tia Cherry and her family thought they could ride out Florence at home. Then came the water. Her mother flagged down a storm chaser with a boat who came to her rescue.
It started pouring down, raining again, so I'm like, we got to get out of here because we're not going to make it.
The surge left docks in tatters and damage spread across town.
I'm looking on the street and I'm amazed. I've never seen this kind of damage here.
All night and through the storm-battered day, rescue crews worked to pull more than 360 people who didn't evacuate from their homes. Some who couldn't waited out on their own. The city says at least 140 more are still waiting for rescue. Bob Better is leading a swift boat rescue team from Massachusetts, one of 2 out-of-state FEMA teams here helping people trapped by water.
How dangerous are these conditions? How hard is this to work in?
It's very difficult. It's dangerous work, and this is what we train for.
At points during the worst of the storm, the city had to call off the search and rescue efforts because it was just too treacherous for those first responders to be out there. But they have promised they are coming for everyone. Jeff?
Chris, thank you very much. Another place that has just been lashed all day long is Beaufort, also northeast of here in North Carolina. And as we found David Begnaud this morning, still there tonight. David, give us an update.
Jeff, the wind gusts right now are upwards of 50 miles per hour, but the strongest gust we felt today hit 92. It will not stop this weather event from Florence. Look, we have gotten a fire hose of wind and moisture throughout the day that is just unrelenting. We took a quick trip to Morehead City, about a quarter mile up the road. There is damage. It's not widespread. It is isolated, but there is damage. We haven't heard of any injuries as of right now. The roads are still empty. There are a few police officers on the road, but that's about it. Power is still out. But Jeff, the bottom line tonight, it is just as bad right now as it was 12 hours ago, and it's expected to continue for another 12 to 24.
All right, yeah, David, thank you so much. Wow, such a slow-moving and dangerous storm because it is moving at such a deliberate pace over the Carolinas. We're going to have much more from North Carolina and South Carolina coming up here shortly in the broadcast. But for now, we want to go back for more news in New York. And Dana Jacobson is standing by. Dana?
Jeff, thank you. Coming up next on the CBS Evening News, Manafort flips. The president's former campaign chairman is cooperating with the special counsel. Plus, what caused the explosions that wiped out dozens of homes? President Trump says he doesn't like flipping, thinks maybe it should be illegal, but his former campaign chairman just did it. Paul Manafort agreed today to cooperate with the special counsel's Russia investigation in a plea deal that will spare Manafort his second criminal trial this year. Here's Paula Reed.
A tough day for Mr. Manafort, but he's accepted responsibility.
Moments after former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort pleaded guilty, his attorney Kevin Downing said he did it for the sake of his family.
He wanted to make sure that his family was able to remain safe and live a good life.
During an hour-long hearing in federal court, Manafort pleaded guilty to 2 felony counts related to his foreign lobbying. Even more significantly, he agreed to cooperate in special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation by providing unspecified documents and testifying before the grand jury. It's a significant shift in legal strategy. Just over a month ago, Downing dismissed any chance of a deal.
Any chance that he may decide to flip and cooperate?
No chance.
Manafort is the most significant witness secured by special counsel Mueller. His cooperation is an ominous development for President Trump, who has consistently dismissed the special counsel investigation as a witch hunt. It's unclear what information Manafort has agreed to share. He was with the campaign for 5 months and was present during the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting with a Russian delegation offering dirt on Hillary Clinton. Even after Manafort was convicted on tax and bank fraud charges last month in Virginia, the president still spoke fondly of him and did not rule out a presidential pardon.
I must tell you that Paul Manafort's a good man.
But Manafort's cooperation makes a pardon unlikely, and today the White House tried to distance itself from the former campaign chairman, saying in a statement, this had absolutely nothing to do with the president or his victorious 2016 presidential campaign. About a dozen members of the special counsel team attended today's hearing, and at the end, they were hugging and congratulating one another. But their work is not over. Manafort won't be sentenced until well after the November midterms, suggesting the Russia investigation will continue into next year. Dana?
Paula Reed in Washington. Thank you, Paula. The governor of Massachusetts today declared a state of emergency in 3 towns north of Boston. They were hit by rapid-fire natural gas explosions yesterday. A first responder described it as Armageddon. 80 homes burned, 39 were destroyed, more than 8,000 people were evacuated. One teenager was killed when a chimney fell on his car. State officials blame it on gas lines that were overpressurized. The local gas utility has been removed from the emergency response. Coming up, more storm coverage as the Carolinas continue to get pummeled. We'll check in on a town where the floodwater is rising.
All right, we're back here tonight from North Carolina, and floodwaters are rising tonight in Jacksonville, North Carolina. That is where rescue crews are racing to rescue both people and their pets. Adriana Diaz is standing by there. Adriana?
Jeff, this is what officials here have been worried about. Storm surge coming in from a nearby river that feeds into the ocean, and it's being made worse by all of this. About 12 inches of rain have fallen on Jacksonville. This entire county is under a mandatory evacuation, but a lot of people stayed behind. It didn't take long for the floodwaters to push into Jacksonville, North Carolina, even though it's about 20 miles from the coast. Local residents waded through up to 4 feet of water to make sure no one was trapped in this house. I went along and filmed on my cell phone.
The water's come up to the top of the porch, so they want to make sure no one's stuck inside.
Anybody home?
Why do you think someone might be home?
Both cars still here. Tape on the inside of the windows. Curtains closed.
No one answered. But earlier, Matthew Drake and Sean Boggs went into deeper water by boat, and they found dogs left behind.
Found a couple dogs, and there's a cat on a porch down there that has nowhere to go. The water's rising, so we're gonna try to go get them too.
It was a punishing night of high wind and rain, with hurricane-force gusts that ripped off roofs, toppled trees, and downed power lines. This towering oak tree missed crushing this house by a few feet.
It went down so easy.
Yeah.
I mean, wow, somebody's helping us out.
Last night, across town, dozens of people were evacuated at the Triangle Motor Inn, where Jermaine Lewis was staying with his 2 kids.
Oh my goodness, the roof is gone.
Yep.
Were you in here?
I was in there, had my kids asleep. A lot of wind, rain, spinning, blue lightning, green lightning.
So you came here for safety,
Yep.
and you ended up with no roof.
No roof.
But you're alive.
I'm alive.
In addition to the damaged roofs, the downed trees, and all of this flooding, most of the city also doesn't have power. We got off the phone a bit ago with officials, and they think it could take 2 weeks for the power to return, 4 to 5 days for all this water to recede. They think the worst is over, but it is still dangerous out here, and a curfew remains in place until noon tomorrow. Jeff?
All right, Adriana, thank you very much. When we come back, family members separated by the storm. More than 20,000 people are spending the night in shelters here in North Carolina, and Elaine Quijano met a man in Garner who is desperate for information about his family.
When Robert Faircloth Jr. evacuated, he brought a backpack, a tote bag, and his dog Buster.
This your ride. Sit still.
His home of 40 years sits a half-mile from the ocean in Wilmington and contains everything else he owns.
What's going through your mind?
It's just you worry all day. You don't know what's happening. You like to ride down there and check things out.
He'd planned to ride it out as he'd done in years past.
Why did you decide that you needed to go this time?
I'm not the best health no more, and my trailer's old like me, and I figured I better haul buggy.
But leaving was painful because his family, including his 84-year-old father, stayed, just like every hurricane before.
I hope he's doing okay, my sister and my brother. I hope you guys are okay.
Late Friday, a CBS news crew in Wilmington went by and found his home and his family were just as he left them.
I'm going to smile. I'm going to hug a couple of them.
Robert's not sure exactly when he can return home because he arrived here on an evacuation bus from Wilmington. Now he has to wait until officials there say that it's safe for him and others to return home. Jeff?
Elaine, thank you very much. Some of our CBS stations will be leaving us now, but for many of you, this special expanded edition of the CBS Evening News continues in just a moment. Good evening to those of you just joining us now. I am Jeff Glor in Wilmington, North Carolina. This is an expanded edition of the CBS Evening News tonight as Florence, what was Hurricane Florence, which is now Tropical Storm Florence, continues to lash the Carolinas. This is an enormous storm. It is a slow-moving storm. It was downgraded earlier today with 75-mile-an-hour winds now, still very dangerous. Florence is now blamed for 5 deaths in North Carolina. It made landfall this morning as a Category 1 hurricane about 10 miles east of here in Wrightsville Beach. Since then, it has been hitting the Carolinas with strong winds. We're just getting another one of these heavy bands right now. The rain is going to be around for a long time here. Florence is moving west at less than 5 miles an hour. As the mayor of Wilmington said to me, at times people have been able to walk faster than Florence is moving. The storm has knocked out power to nearly 1 million homes and businesses. We do have a team of correspondents in the region providing full coverage tonight of Florence. Florence continued to unleash on the Carolinas with a powerful combination of wind and rain. In Newbern, North Carolina, roads were flooded, and catastrophic winds over 100 miles an hour tore roofs off buildings and toppled trees. By midday, Florence had claimed her first lives when a tree crashed onto a home in Wilmington, killing a mother and her infant daughter. Rescue crews were able to save the father. Gives you an idea of some of the damage here in Wilmington. That's an 80-year-old oak tree. It's split 2 ways. Part of it came out toward the street. The other half went into the house, knocked the chimney off. Alex Hull returned to his neighborhood late this afternoon to survey the damage to his home. Right? When did this happen?
Happened this morning.
Just happened.
Last night, the first 2 limbs came off, and then when the wind got higher, then this side went down and hit the roof.
Myrtle Beach, South Carolina is getting some of the worst of Florence right now, and Don Daler is standing by there now. Don, what are you seeing?
Well, Jeff, I tell you, it sure still feels like a hurricane. We're still in the midst of a very intense tropical event. One of the main fears here was massive beach erosion, which, this being a tourist area, you could tell that was one of the things that they really were afraid of. We haven't seen it. It has not yet come to fruition, but we spoke just a little while ago, both the city and state officials, they are not yet breathing a sigh of relief because, as you know, this storm has been very unpredictable and very unusual. It could wobble, it could head south and still cause problems around here. We do know that thousands of National Guardsmen are on standby waiting to see if they have to do any water rescues. There are utility crews from all over the United States who are waiting to restore power to parts of the city and the area around here that lost power. There are thousands of people who evacuated, who are in shelters. They're eager to come back, but engineers are waiting to go inspect bridges and roads to make sure they're safe enough to pass when this storm ends, Jeff, but that's anybody's guess as to when that happens.
All right, Don, thank you very much. You mentioned those National Guard soldiers, more than 9,000 of them now working during Florence. Remember, they left their families to try to help people that potentially could be in danger or need that help tonight. That includes Beaufort, which has seen some of the worst of Florence here. David Begnaud has been there all day. He remains in Beaufort tonight. David, to you.
Jeff, you know, the conditions feel right now a lot like they did last night when we reported for the CBS Evening News. Relentless. It just has not let up at any point. We're staying at a condominium complex, and I got to tell you, we're about 100 feet off the ground. When we went to bed last night to try and get at least a few hours of sleep, I sat on the bed and put my feet on the ground, and I could feel a slight vibration. It has been incredible to watch this fire hose of wind and moisture just pelt this area right off the ocean. So Morehead City is not far from where we are. There is damage. It's isolated. It is not widespread. The power remains out. By the way, a record was set. The storm surge in this area, combined with the high tide, hit 7 feet. That's a record that was last set in the 50s. And Jeff, I'll leave you with this. You know, meteorologists get a bad rep sometimes for not being able to predict the weather precisely all the time. Well, you should know this. Hurricane Florence made landfall 2 miles away from where the National Hurricane Center said it would make landfall. They made that prediction 6 days ago. How's that for accuracy?
Yeah, pretty impressive prediction by the National Weather Service. We're going to check in with our meteorologist, Megan Glaros, who's driving around. Megan, talk about what you're seeing now and where the storm is heading.
Right, Jeff. I mean, the bands are starting to get a little bit more fierce here in Wilmington right now. So this is not the eye wall now, obviously. That made landfall long ago and has calmed down quite a bit. Now it's a tropical storm. The eye is no longer really visible on satellite imagery. Winds are down to 70. Movement, though, is so slow. West at 3 miles per hour. It's 50 miles now west and southwest of our location here in Wilmington. What we're looking at, though, are those outer bands. So you're going to get that band wrap around, and it's going to continue to bring rain like we see outside right now through the weekend, because what we have is an incredibly slow-moving storm. I think by tomorrow afternoon, it's maybe close to the center of South Carolina, probably still as a tropical storm, though winds will likely be down to about 45. It continues working west, but will still be a rainmaker. And these are the bands that we're seeing here in Wilmington right now, bringing us the potential for additional heavy rainfall. Okay, so we get something called Doppler indicated rainfall totals. We're not getting a lot of reports in yet. Many times the National Weather Service will wait until the storm is over before you get the official numbers on it. Obviously, it's still raining. So we look at the Doppler indicated totals that comes in sort of from the radar estimates. We're going for 20 inches plus across areas just east of Wilmington and into North Carolina. And by the time it's all said and done, I suspect we're going to see some rainfall totals in excess of 30 plus inches of rain. Now, you'll remember Harvey picked up 5 feet of rain, so we're not getting into that territory. But for this area of the country, the way it's set out, the way the topography is, we're talking about very, very heavy rainfalls, and again, continuing likely through Sunday, Jeff.
Yeah, Megan, and as you know, where we are here in Wilmington, it's already saturated. It's gotten so much rain this year, and now you're talking about 30 plus inches. It's just extraordinary amounts. Courtney Zabowski is also here in the Wilmington area. She's in Wilmington, but actually overlooking Wrightsville Beach, where the storm made landfall. Courtney?
Right, we are along the Intercoastal Waterway. Right there is Wrightsville Beach. What we are seeing here is that driving rain, still those strong winds. We've been driving around looking at damage, roof damage, siding damage, trees toppled onto power lines. We've talked with hurricane holdouts who say that what's so surprising to them is how long this is lasting, 24 hours of this rain and wind. They're hoping to get through tonight into tomorrow and start the cleanup process. Jeff?
All right, Courtney, thank you very much. We're going to check in now with DeMarco Morgan. Lumberton, North Carolina is still trying to recover from a hurricane 2 years ago, now dealing with Florence and trying to shield itself as best as possible tonight. DeMarco, what's happening in Lumberton?
Volunteers and National Guardsmen are here outside the West Lumberton Baptist Church sandbagging, trying to protect the town.
These volunteers, many of them residents, got the call for help earlier this morning, and they showed up in big numbers, as you can see. But they're in a race against time because they need to get these sandbags to the most critical area, which is not too far from where we are standing. But are you guys trying to get ahead of this thing because it's headed our way now?
We are trying to get ahead of it. The water levels are expected to be higher than Matthew. So we're trying to sandbag this opening up, trying to save homes and businesses.
2 years ago, Hurricane Matthew dumped 20 inches of rain on Lumberton. According to city officials, the town's protective levee never breached during that storm. But here, where the railroad passes through, the levee drops down for railroad tracks. And that's where they say the floodwaters from Matthew rushed in. Florence is expected to drop even more rain than Matthew did.
We're trying to plug the hole in the levee where I-95 and CSX flooded during Hurricane Matthew.
We asked Corey Walters of Lumberton's Public Works Department why they waited to sandbag during the storm. He says the town reached out to the railroad company for permission to close up the levee on Tuesday, and they were denied. They then reached out to the governor, who issued an order to protect the area.
Very critical for you guys to get this patched up. It is. We've basically got a lot of work to do, no time to do it, and really not a whole lot of time to even think about what we're doing or how the best way to do it is.
Now, CSX Railroad released a statement saying they have provided safe access to the community to minimize flooding. Meanwhile, Jeff, the Lumber River stands at 7 feet now, and it's still rising, and it's expected to reach flood stage sometime tomorrow and crest at nearly 25 feet.
Yeah, it could be actually a couple days even for some other places to crest potentially in this area. The agency, of course, in charge of coordinating the federal response to hurricanes like Florence is FEMA. FEMA was criticized heavily last year following its response to Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. And Jeff Pegues today got a chance to visit inside FEMA headquarters.
Much of southeastern North Carolina and northeastern South
Around
Carolina.
midday, FEMA held the second of two daily briefings.
North Carolina, there's now flash flood warnings that cover.
We were in the room as speaker after speaker warned of the hurricane's menacing rain. Administrator Brock Long was on his way to brief the president when we caught up to him.
Well, right now, the focus is life safety. What concerns me the most is trying to get to the people that didn't evacuate, and that's incredibly hard to do so. We can't put our own people in danger.
You're going to brief the president now? What are you going to tell him?
Let him know that we're pre-positioned as best we can be.
Pre-positioned with swift water and urban search and rescue teams in the storm zone, and ready to step in when the state's call for help. What is in this room?
So this is the National Response Coordination Center here at FEMA headquarters.
FEMA's James Joseph says even with all of its assets, there are limits to what FEMA can do.
What's concerning about this event is because of the continuous rain, no one can send crews out to start repairs until the storm has really passed. So we're talking several days of power outages where they've already begun.
Almost exactly a year after the hurricane in Puerto Rico, the pressure is on FEMA to respond effectively to hurricanes. Brock Long says that FEMA is used to the blame game, that disasters are frustrating, and FEMA is always the end of the line. Jeff.
We've been without power here in Wilmington all day long. We're generator power only. So as we keep working on that, we're going to send it back to Dana Jacobson in the studio in New York. She has the rest of today's news. Dana?
All right, Jeff, thank you. Still ahead on this special expanded edition of the CBS Evening News, a state of emergency is declared after gas explosions devastate 3 towns. And the president's former campaign chairman cops a plea, agreeing to cooperate with the special counsel. Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker declared a state of emergency today in 3 towns north of Boston that were rocked by natural gas explosions yesterday. 1 person was killed. Baker has also removed the local gas company from the emergency response. More now from Kenneth Craig.
It happened without notice during a series of gas explosions and fires yesterday that raced through homes in 3 communities north of Boston. This North Andover family returned home Friday and tried to salvage what they could after their house went up in flames. Louise Buzzino lives next door and knew something was wrong when she heard a noise coming from her basement.
And I knew right away that perhaps I should leave the house. I grabbed my cell phone, came out in the yard, turned my head, and saw that this house was on fire.
In neighboring Lawrence, 18-year-old Lionel Rondon was killed when a chimney from an exploding home slammed into his car. At least 25 others were injured. Dozens of buildings suffered damage.
It looked like Armageddon.
Investigators, led by the NTSB, are trying to figure out how a natural gas line to over 8,500 customers of Columbia Gas became overpressurized, leading to the explosions and fires.
Some residents here have absolutely nothing to come home to, and that includes the man who lives right here in this house. He's actually a local police officer, and he was on duty last night when his own home went up in flames. He rushed home, he made sure his daughter was out safely, and then he started evacuating his fellow neighbors. Dana.
Kenneth, Craig, thank you. The special counsel got Paul Manafort to flip. In a blow to President Trump, his former campaign chairman agreed today to cooperate with Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. Manafort entered a guilty plea to reduce charges of conspiracy unrelated to the campaign, avoiding what would have been his second criminal trial this year. Paula Reed is covering the story and joins us now. Paula, how significant is this plea deal?
Well, Paul Manafort is the most significant witness secured by the special counsel investigation so far. He ran the Trump campaign for several months. He would certainly be privy to any cooperation between Russia and the campaign. And he was also at that 2016 Trump Tower meeting with Russians offering dirt on Hillary Clinton. And this is not good news for the president. He's tried to dismiss this investigation as a witch hunt, but Manafort is his fifth associate to plead guilty in the probe.
You say not a good news for the president, but is this a good deal for Manafort?
It remains to be seen. On its face, it looks pretty good. They've agreed to drop 5 of the charges he faced here in Washington and to drop all of the charges in Virginia where a jury couldn't reach a verdict. But the best deal for Paul Manafort is one where he doesn't have to provide any evidence against the president so that he could still potentially get a presidential pardon. And as of tonight, we don't know what he has agreed to provide the special counsel or, more importantly, what the president thinks about his cooperation.
Paula Reed with the latest on a Manafort plea deal. Paula, thank you. Jeff Glor will be right back from the storm zone where rescuers face an agonizing wait for the weather to clear.
We are back now from Wilmington, North Carolina. In some cases today, the weather was so bad that rescuers were told to stand down. The Coast Guard has been unable to fly. Mark Strassman is at a Coast Guard staging area in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Mark.
Jeff, take a look. This is a Sikorsky Jayhawk. It's the Coast Guard's biggest search and rescue helicopter, and it would already be in New Bern helping out, but the weather is still just too rough, and it's a frustrating situation for everyone at this Coast Guard air station.
We can't quite get to them because of the weather right over the top of them.
Captain Joe Deere's ready to launch his Coast Guard air rescue unit to New Bern, but this weather radar shows embedded tornadoes that could down his helicopters.
You can see big storm, high winds, and significant even for something as robust as our H-60 helicopter.
Deere took us to one of the grounded Jayhawks in this hangar.
This is all staged to go with a lot of extra equipment in it.
Its crew of 5 can rescue up to 8 people every time it flies.
It's a very powerful aircraft. We have onboard radar, about 200 feet of cable. It's got external tanks so we can put up to 6,000 pounds of fuel on it. And it's got the ability to go along in those low visibility routes.
2 years ago, this same Coast Guard air station rescued dozens of people stranded during Hurricane Matthew. They're ready to do it again for Florence victims, but there's still poor visibility, and the storm's downdraft pressure can humble even a powerful helicopter like this. You got into this business to serve, right?
Yes.
To serve.
Yep.
Must be a little frustrating knowing there's a need out there, and yet you can't respond to it because of the weather.
This helicopter is very big, it's very strong, it's very capable. It's the most modern type of machinery you can put in a situation like that, and it was right at the limits. We couldn't go and effect the rescue.
One of these Jayhawks actually went out on a rescue mission earlier today and had to turn back because of a bird strike. Captain Deere doesn't think the weather will be safe enough to fly and try some rescues until tomorrow morning. So, Jeff, some of the people who need to be rescued may have to spend the night on their roof.
Mark, thanks very much. We were with some of those guys last year. You can be assured if they can get up, they will, to try to help people out. Conditions have gotten a lot worse just during this broadcast here as Florence's back half then moves through the outer portions of North Carolina. We're going to have much more coming up on some flash flood emergencies and also another look at where Florence is headed next. Back from North Carolina now, and we're going to check in with Megan Glaros again, who has some new information coming in from the National Weather Service. Megan?
Yes, Jeff, as hard as it's raining here in Wilmington, raining even harder out near New Bern, Emerald Isle, and Cedar Island. There's been a flash flood emergency posted. That's about as serious as it gets. Widespread flooding, and the threat continues. We have flash flood warnings all along the Carolina coastline, and the reason for that, of course, is because of this very heavy rain like we're having, but again, even heavier right there. So I think the things to take away from this right now, we are not done with this system yet by any stretch of the imagination. The highest surge was reported 8.9 feet. That's also New Bern. Highest wind gust 106 miles per hour, Cape Lookout, North Carolina. And rain, get this, nearly 2 feet in Carteret County. And again, that flash flood emergency for areas near New Bern, because they are getting this hefty band of rain, which will slowly, very slowly, shift southward and westward over the course of the next 24 hours. So I suspect here in Wilmington we'll likely get a little taste of that coming within the next day. Jeff?
Already coming down at an unreal pace here in Wilmington. Megan, thank you very much. That is tonight's CBS Evening News. Coverage continues all night long on our streaming network, CBSN, and then tomorrow on CBS This Morning. I'm Jeff Glor in Wilmington, North Carolina. Good night.